Okay. To recap the previous game, Nicholas Ridley had an experience, maybe a vision or a memory, of a stack of stones being built up vertically by himself and other Canaanites, while a disembodied voice spoke to them. He sought answers from Octavia, who was in this experience. But her answers were cryptic, and she simply recommended patience and trusting in the future. Robert and Nicholas met with Cornelius in Canterbury and verified much of what they'd heard about this Tower of Talons in Norwich, as well as Basileus. But also learned more about the cell of Inquisitors nearby. And on asking Octavia, Robert learned that only in Norwich are the Elders' great powers of insight and revelation inhibited. Robert soon departed for Chester. Elined, meanwhile, visited Lincoln to pay her respect to Cormac's sire, Sir Hugh, and also to bury Cormac's ashes. And for this act of charity, Sir Hugh freely offered a great favor. Elined also visited her great-uncle Cortez with news of his prodigal child, bent on revenge. Cortez seemed unsurprised and driven by his conviction to let the strongest of the two decide his fate. And finally, Judith met with Elined to parley on behalf of the Anarchs, offering a conditional truce to face the greater threat of the Mercers and Basileus. Elined took this offer with her and departed. So now we open up back to Judith, still at the inn in Birmingham, late April 1456. You have scarce few months before the Anarchs' promised assault begins, unless armistice is achieved. What do you do?
The first thing I want to do is see what I know / can learn about the nobility for the area. I believe it's the Earl of Warwick, but I don't know for sure.
For that, I will have you make an intelligence politics roll. Difficulty 6. Let's look up my notes. Alright, 2 successes. So you know the Earl of Warwick is a Neville, part of this great feud of the Nevilles and the Percys, and a great supporter of the Duke of York. And you were correct in the title, Earl of Warwick. He was very important in helping to win the Battle of St. Albans. That is the extent of your knowledge of the Earl of Warwick.
And given that there's a strong odds that I'll be back here at least a few more times, I want to try and start insinuating myself into some of the local culture, specifically with like the Smiths, the City Guard, as much as I possibly can. Any mercenaries who might be passing through while she's here.
Alright, can you tell me more about what the ends are, what the goal is?
The Smiths largely are mostly to do with building a new herd in this area. There'd also be business interests, people she could work with to facilitate certain ends. If she can cajole them the right way, they'd also be a source of finances as necessary.
All right. Let me look at your sheet. Or any character sheet. Give me a... I'll take Charisma Empathy or Charisma Expression. Difficulty 7. Start building inroads with the people of Birmingham.
I feel like this is kind of important, so I'm going to go ahead and spend the willpower on it.
Okay. Alright, 2 successes with your willpower. Make a note of that so I can reference it later. And how much time are you spending at Birmingham right now?
In my head, she'd have been there for a week before Elined got there, and she'd probably linger for a few more days since she's meant to be back here in a month's time.
Okay. That makes sense. So this would kind of be almost your full-time nightly job, is spending your time here cajoling and socializing with the people of Birmingham, which, as I mentioned before, is a relatively small town, although it is starting to become more popular simply because of how much foot traffic it gets. The fairs are quite popular and very lucrative for the church, which you find is the primary beneficiary of these fairs.
Okay, I missed everything from it's starting to be to the primary beneficiary of these fairs.
Sorry, did I cut out?
Yeah, a little bit.
So it's starting to become more popular due to all the foot traffic and the fairs that are held. Although primarily it's the church that benefits from the finances, from the money coming in from the fairs. So with 2 successes, you start to build some inroads. It's not much to lean on, but with more progress and effort, you could become kind of a fixture, a staple, and a known quantity here. So like I said, make a note of that, and we can come back to it.
Then a note has been made. And then she would ride for a meeting with Alice.
Okay.
And update her on things.
So riding back to the Solway coast outside of Carlisle?
Yep.
Okay. Birmingham to basically Carlisle. It's quite a trek, 200 miles.
I think last time we agreed it was about a fortnight.
That sounds right. And I will say that's still true. So you're going to be back in Carlisle at the beginning of 1456. not literally in Carlisle, but you know what I mean.
I'm with you.
All right. So I'm going to put a pin in that, and we will come back to your meeting. I just want to see what everyone else gets up to during this time. As I believe, Nicholas, you're a little bit behind this time movement. You're still in Canterbury, and I believe you were working on stalking and learning more about Cornelius.
Correct.
Okay. And could you refresh me on how you want to go about getting this information and learning more about him?
He's going to do his best to assess Cornelius's personality type and make himself invaluable for the time that he's in the city. Making it clear that he's there at Cornelius's pleasure, not the prince's.
All right. Let me look his notes up again. Alright. Give me a manipulation, empathy. Difficulty here is going to be 8. He's pretty cagey.
Alright, and devious?
Absolutely.
Some manipulation plus empathy?
Yes, unless you want to shoot for something else.
Actually, that works fine. Well, one success.
You do get to learn more about Cornelius. He does speak to you a bit more about his past. You learn a bit more of his history in service to the former Prince of Lincoln, John Mark. He is a little bit more reticent to speak on his embrace and how he's kind of come about to his current position. But as far as becoming invaluable to him, were you thinking of like services you could provide?
Precisely.
Okay.
If nothing else, then as both a skilled physician and investigator.
You have learned, both through your efforts here and through Robert in the interrogation, that he does seem to have much interest in undoing the Company of Mercers and undoing this faction which he feels is responsible for Jean-Marc's death. It seems to be his guiding purpose in Unlife now. And anything that you can do to further that, he would find invaluable. But he admits that after the interrogation of Bishop Louis de Poitiers, he isn't sure what he can do to further investigate them except for perhaps go to Norwich himself, and he feels like that would be too dangerous now that he is the head of Merchants of the Staple.
Robert was headed to Norwich, or where was Robert headed?
He was headed not to Norwich. He was headed to
Chester?
Chester, yes.
How far away is Norwich from where we are now?
It is not very far. Norwich is in the county of Norfolk, which is northeast of London, so let's see. I'll figure this out pretty quick. Maybe not as quick as I do. 137 miles approximately, so around 240. If you wanted to ride, you could probably make that in less than a fortnight, depending on weather, probably 7 to 10 days, and how hard you were riding.
Well, he did want to make himself invaluable, so he will offer to Cornelius to go to Norwich and look around, see what he can find.
Cornelius is surprised at your adamant intention of fulfilling what you actually said. He says it will likely be very dangerous given all they've learned. If this company of mercers has the resources they do and all that so far has been discovered is true, to go in person to try and search things up could be very risky. He cautions you on that.
Nicholas will assure him that he has several things in his favor. First of all, he's never become entangled with the mercers or any of their business. Second of all, he can change his face. And third of all, he's a very good performer. Although he doesn't say that in such a way to make Cornelius suspect that he's performing him or playing him. Though, of course, he is.
That does much to assuage his concerns, and indeed, if you do depart in that direction from Canterbury, you can consider yourself to have 2 successes on gaining his trust, as he will have seen that as genuine, earnest effort to align yourself with him, and that will go towards building rapport. So you can make a note of that too, and you can remind me in the future if I don't remember that.
All right. There's one favor that he wants, and it's a small one. Some mortal vassal to send along to make sure that he's safe during the day.
Cornelius, fortunately, with the new resources he has, it's not difficult for him to send a manservant to accompany you. One that he trusts will be discreet and reliable, as Cornelius will not deal with anything less. So he agrees to send one with you.
Perfect. Then to Norwich he will go.
Alright. So that will also take you into just the beginning of May by the time you arrive. Robert, you left just a little bit before these events, heading in the direction of Chester. That will take you a little bit longer, because that's 240 miles. And are you riding or going by carriage? Because I believe your herd and everybody is back at the manor in Canterbury with Cornelius, correct?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. So it's kind of how much do you want to move to Chester?
He's not planning on staying for an extended period, so he'll probably just bring along his two most trusted ghouls and maybe a few of his herd, a few attendants.
Alright, they don't have horses, so...
We'll go by carriage.
By carriage? Okay. You can do that. I'm not going to make you roll for the fare, but it will slow your travel down a bit. Let's see here. This is going to be closer to a 3-week journey across England. But given that you'll be stopping at some major cities along the way, I won't need you to feed. Or roll for feeding, rather. So you left a bit earlier, but your trip was longer, so for simplicity's sake, I'm going to say you end up arriving in Chester in early May also. So you are in Chester. Everybody's changing places. That's happening. And then Elined, you were in Birmingham at the end of April. Did you return immediately to London?
That is our intention, to return and give the report.
Okay. It's not... well, it's still 100 miles. But... you make it back to London, and did you want to open a scene to give this report, or are you okay with hand-waving it?
You can hand wave it if you want.
Alright. You present to Chamberlain Mordecai. How do you phrase this offer?
Apologies, I'm currently skimming over the notes.
Sure, go for it.
Well, the first thing she'd bring up is the information that she was specifically asked to find out about, which is the death of John Mark, which was Irish kindred from beyond the Pale. And that, from the sounds of things, it seems like they have a certain ally down in Wales. But as per the deal that the Anarchs are striking, sorry, had to hack up a lung.
Hack away.
As per the deal the Anarchs are striking, it would start with the threat that this individual, Basileus, poses, and them more seeing it for the common enemy, and trying to gear things towards, hold on. Try and gear things towards, why am I having a brain fart?
Happens to the best of us.
She's more trying to play up the threat that this individual poses, and before getting into the what they want out of it.
Before getting to what they want.
Before getting to their terms.
Okay, so we can kind of break that up. I'll have you to kind of relay this in the hopes of, like, you know, really amplifying and magnifying the threat of Basileus as the draw point of the argument to come. I'll have you make a manipulation expression. And I will give you a difficulty 7. Ambrose is still wary of the Anarchs. 3 successes. You do a very good job of poignantly demonstrating the Anarchs recognize how much of a threat this is, that they're willing to come to the table and talk, and really emphasize that. And
that we have other enemies on the doorstep as well, both in Wales and in beyond the Pale in Ireland.
Mm-hmm. So now is not the time for rebellion or infighting. And then continue on. You wanted to propose the Anarch's idea?
Yes, she's coming to their turn.
And what are those terms? Is what you're asked. If you need a refresher, I think it was the
I got it. I was just trying to find the exact part in the notes. After they dispose of Basileus, the Anarchs want a full end to hostilities. The Anarchs will not act against the Covenant, and the Covenant will not act against the Anarchs. Furthermore, they want Norwich, and they want to install their Anarch leader as prince.
Do you say anything else?
that for the assault for the assault to be successful, it will likely have to use a good deal of Canaanites. And that word back is expected in a month's time, with the assault being 3 months off. I believe it was 3 months off.
Yeah, about that. Okay.
I believe that's everything we went over.
That sounds about right. So I will take a... Give me the same roll, but it's going to be difficulty 8. It's lowered because you did so well talking it up.
I'm gonna spend willpower.
Okay. Wow.
No relevant specialties.
3 successes with your willpower. At first, when you propose like the end of all hostilities, Ambrose is visibly agitated. And then when you bring up the idea that the Covenant would cede Norwich to the Anarchs, he begins to crush one of the pews in his hands as he's resting it there. But you continue on, and you couch it in such a way that this is the lesser of two evils. Fortunately, you are well spoken enough to keep Ambrose from fully flying into a rage. But his anger is not fully quelled. He doesn't immediately agree or decline. He seems obviously vexed and conflicted. He eventually tells you that he must think on this, knowing that it would be best to consult with other Covenant, since this is a decision that all should be made together, but time being of the essence, there may not be enough nights before this attack happens. So he tells you that you should return to ask for more time so that a convening of the council can happen.
She will accept and later attempt to do so.
Okay. And we'll say that wraps up April 1456 for you. What does Elined mean to do following this meeting?
In case either of her allies stop by, she's going to leave a note at her manor for them to find.
Okay, leaving a message at your manor. What does the message say?
Attempting to mend things ask Ambrose for more information.
Okay, you leave that with one of the staff at your manor?
At her little house, yeah, and instruct them only to give it to, well, either Robert or Nick.
Okay. And then you depart for Birmingham again?
Yes, after gathering the necessary supplies.
Alright. And Gertrude going with or staying back to manage the household?
Gertrude's staying back so the letter doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
Alright. I'll make a note of that. You begin the arduous journey back north. Well, maybe less arduous compared to some others. But it will still take you... If you're going by carriage, can you ride a horse?
I do not have a ride, no.
Okay, so yeah, by carriage. It will take you maybe 8 or 9 days. I will say probably 8 days. So you will be in the beginning of May when you return to Birmingham. However, at this time, Judith will be on her way up north to Carlisle, which will circle back. And Judith, you do find, after some time searching around as before, the encampment of the Anarchs. It seems to move. They're somewhat semi-nomadic. They stay relatively close to the area, but with scouts open looking for travelers. But it seems like they're cautious enough not to really fortify like they did in Douglas. What is your goal with your meeting with Ellen?
Just bringing back a report of what was said, what was demanded, and what was offered effectively. She's not as concerned with an outrage kind of response from Ellen as might be a concern with Ambrose, so apart from a little bit of flowery language, it's a pretty straightforward report.
Alright, and just so I have it clear in my head, your report is you met with Elined and gave your proposal on behalf of the Anarchs of taking Norwich, and basically the same thing that Elined just said.
Effectively, she'd couch it as, well, you gave me no terms, so I invented my own.
Alright, and are you trying to sell her on this idea, or are you literally just reporting, giving the facts, and letting her go from there?
She'd be given the facts, and then if she looks dubious, would present an argument to help kind of steer her that way. We can definitely get into that scene if you'd like to.
Alright, we will do that. I'm always open to opening up scenes.
It sounds like more elaboration needs done, that's all I'm saying.
Alright. One moment. So you give your report to Ellen after finding her, and she seems to pace in thought. It is not the goal of this anarchy to return to the way things are, just for our own fief of freedom.
Nor was that my proposal. I asked that we become a sovereign nation unto ourselves, not a vassal of the Covenant. Apart from paying respect to the silence of the blood, we would be under no obligation.
Then our revolution would be contained to just that one city.
And if we are right, other Canaanites will flock to us. If we are wrong, we will fail. It seems a just test for an ideology not yet tested.
Make a manipulation, empathy, or expression, difficulty 6. It's easier for you since she trusts and values your opinion.
You said 6.
Yes. Whereas Ambrose neither trusts nor values Ellen's opinion.
Persuasive specialty, I feel like, applies.
Absolutely. So 2 successes. Her eyes catch yours as you elaborate on this, the testing of this philosophy. Perhaps this is an option forward. However, I do not expect this to be the end of our conflict with the Covenant. We need not say anything more except that the terms are acceptable. After we have secured a foothold in Norwich, I intend for our operations to continue. We will overthrow the shackles of the Elders, but perhaps Norwich will be a stronger foothold to begin that process.
They will come with counter-offer. Possibly an attempt to delay resolution. How far are we willing to bend? This is negotiation after all.
She angles away from you and then looks at you sidelong. How well do you know and trust Elined?
I trust her well enough that I know that she will present any offer in as good a faith as she is aware. I don't believe she would intentionally be duplicitous with me unless she herself was lied to. How much I trust Ambrose is a different question.
My concern is that delaying too long pushes us into colder months. The Scots will not march in winter, nor would I have an assault under less than ideal circumstances.
I will insist that any action on Norwich take place no later than August. but an agreement must be reached before July.
You may tell them they have until the beginning of fall, when the harvests are due, when the rains come. That is the longest I am willing to push this out.
I'll do everything I can to make that unnecessary.
I recognize this threat as greater than that of the Covenant. However, I am not willing to sacrifice all that we have done and all those we have lost, if the Covenant simply means to crush us.
Quite so. But I've never walked into a negotiation with a casket full of gold and walked out with it empty.
She smirks faintly. The beginning of fall, then. See if you might reach an answer by then.
I mean to have an answer long before then. But if I must bend, then I shall. We'll see what they can do with a few extra weeks first.
If it comes to it, I will send messenger at the beginning of fall to Birmingham. And I will alert you to the steps being taken and where to go.
If I believe that negotiations will no longer bear fruit, I'll come riding north with a cart full of foodstuffs to see if I can't get Carlisle to open their gates for us.
She nods again. I am glad that you know you may be a diplomat, but before that, you are an anarch.
If I can save British lives, one way or the other, I'll do so. Canite or kind.
Be cautious on the roads. I fear the attention you've drawn may increase the surveillance of this group.
I'm taking less traveled roads, avoiding Chesterpool entirely. Barbaros is not a fan.
I would send others to aid you, but we are too scarce on manpower as is.
I'll see to that myself. There's not many people in Birmingham, but it is a crossroads. What it lacks in permanent residents, it more than makes up for in wayfarers and wanderers.
leave you to it then. And she starts to step back into the tall grass of the coast. You hear the sound get quieter as she disappears.
In that case, after a day's rest, Judith will be on her way back south again.
All right. And we will transition as you make the much longer trip from Carlisle down to Birmingham. Another fortnight, if you're continuing to be cautious. And your passage, as I understand it, skirts the areas of Chester and Liverpool, but doesn't go through them.
Right, it would take the more easterly route through Manchester.
Okay. We said 2 weeks?
Yep.
All right. So you could shave quite a bit of time off that, or at least some time off of that, by taking the main roads. If you stick to your more cautious paths, it'll be maintaining about 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more. So basically you have the options of more cautious or more quick.
I feel like this is a trap.
Everything's a trap. There's danger either way, of course, but
Right.
given that time
Right.
is a factor.
Judith said a month. She'll stick to her word.
All right. You will continue on a cautious path. But I will have you, since you're going through Manchester, give me another wit stealth roll. Alright. So you will return to Birmingham about the time you said, which at this point will bring you mid-May. So Elined will have a little bit of time to wait. In the meantime, we will catch up with Nicholas. Is going to Norwich. Around early May 1456. So Nicholas, you ride out north. It's the county of Norfolk. The outlying lands of the county are mostly even low-lying, with a few chalk hills. It's rich farming out here, productive fishing along the coast and the inland waterways. There are signs that once this was an area of much wool production. You pass many farms that look like they may have looms or other such a business. But it seems like the population isn't as dense as all the buildings. Some of them seem dilapidated. Despite that, Norfolk seems to be one of the more densely populated and wealthier counties in all of England. You would have spent enough time here to know that this is probably one of the four, or I should say Norwich is probably one of the four richest towns in all of England. The capital. Only about 100 miles northeast of London. And as you reach the city, you see that Norwich boasts dozens of well-appointed churches and chapels, Dominican and Franciscan friaries, and even upon miles out, you can see the tall spires of Norwich Cathedral stretching hundreds of feet up, and the great stone wall which encompasses a very large area, the entire city encompassed within this wall, much larger than what the London walls encompass. You see that on approach, when you reach the city gates, everything around Norwich is virgin land, untouched fields. 20 miles east of the city is the associated port town of Great Yarmouth. Much like York and its sister town of Hull, the roads between Norwich and Yarmouth are well maintained and patrolled. In the Royal Norwich Castle is a well-fortified moat and bailey, which seems to dominate the cityscape, outshadowed only by the cathedral itself. What is Nicholas's first goal when he arrives in the city?
To procure some place to rest. Some ramshackle inn or of some sort would be fine as long as it can be sufficiently sunproof.
Alright. Upon looking around, you find one of these inns, a dim and dingy kind of tavern, the Golden Goat. It's very low light in this tavern area, at least. Not at all appropriate compared to others you've been. After speaking briefly with the barkeep, a brawny, plump man, you arrange for some lodgings here, and you find that there are some underground lodgings, just a few basement level rooms that would be very suitable for you.
That will do.
Make a perception alertness difficulty 8 as you're passing through the tavern on your way towards the basement.
Perfect.
Give you 3 successes with your specialty. You notice that at first the dim lighting in the tavern was a bit peculiar, but you notice actually that much of the tavern is very well designed, almost, with many dark corners and spaces, designed almost intentionally for feeding, and With 3 successes, you even note that some of the patrons already look a bit pale. You think you may have stumbled upon more than just an inn here.
Which would explain the basement rooms.
Perhaps.
He's not too concerned yet. It's almost taken for granted that he won't be well recognized here in Norwich. Even in his home city, he did not get out much. And he certainly does not have much of a reputation, other than recently throwing in his lot with the gauntlet.
Are you doing anything intentionally to make yourself discreet? Or do you trust in your anonymity?
He's actually going to use the mask to hide some of his more obvious traits, including his clothing. Hopefully none of them looked at him too closely when he came in, that they will remark that he looks different when he comes out. Shall I make a roll for that?
Yes. I was just looking it up myself. Going for Mask of 1,000 Faces. Manipulation and Performance. Your difficulty will be 7.
Well, trust in anonymity he must.
Alright. You're finding it difficult to concentrate tonight, or perhaps to come up with a mask to use. It's a little bit difficult when you don't have anyone to really focus on, you think. But such is on life. No one stops you on your way to the basement or out. It is relatively early in the evening. You've arranged for your lodgings. Is there anything else in particular you want to do tonight?
Since it's early, he wants to see what he can find out about the Mercers on a superficial level. Perhaps heading toward a more industrial part of town.
Okay. So you make your way out of the Golden Goat into the streets of Norwich. On initial passing, it reminds you much of other cities, Bristol, London to some extent, although not quite as dense and large. And in some ways larger, since the walls expand more. You get down to what you assess is more industrial focused part of town. Of course, at this hour, really no one is very industrious. Give me a perception investigation roll, difficulty 6. Wow, 5 successes. And actually, I think your specialties will probably apply here too. Remind me of those specialties?
In perception, it is intuitive.
Maybe not, but 5 is still a lot. So you start looking through the city, kind of looking up and down and seeing many of the common sights, the blacksmiths, the tanneries, the Fletchers, some of the finer tailors, You even find a silversmith, or at least where he keeps his shop during the day.
Are any of the tailors open this late?
No. No, you just find the shops. Were
All
you
right.
intentionally looking for one?
Well, only because his clothes are a giveaway.
Yeah, unfortunately, the tailors seem to have gone home for the evening. As far as looking for Mercer-specific offices or activity, you do find a kind of outpost, an office where you recognize the words in the emblem, the Worshipful Company of Mercers. You think you've passed similar ones in other major cities, like London. It is, of course, closed. There are no lights from within. It's a small wooden building. It's very unremarkable. It's just in a row of other buildings and offices for magistrates, other governmental purposes, other representatives of other traders. There's really nothing very noticeable about it at all. If you weren't looking for it, you'd easily miss it. And lastly, with your 5 successes, you detect a strange quality about Norwich, given how close attention you're paying to this city. It feels incomplete. When you're looking for buildings, you get this feeling like you're missing something very obvious. And you cannot shake this sensation, like you have yet to notice something on your periphery. It doesn't feel threatening, but it gives you a sense of unease that you don't feel in other cities.
He's going to put that in the back of his mind and allow his analytical brain to mull over it for a while. Maybe it'll come to him. But for now, perhaps they won't mind if he just lets himself into the company of Mercers and has a look around. Which requires, of course, first that he obfuscate himself.
Okay. Easily enough done. You enter the shadows, stick to the walls. There are still some people out and about on the streets, mostly guards, but the occasional drunk, a couple passing by here and there. A carriage passes by. You wait for an opportune moment and slink away. And so you are concealed for all intents and purposes.
He'll go see about a front or back entrance that he can attempt to coerce.
Yes, the front entrance is locked. Simple wooden door. It doesn't look like much has been done to reinforce it. In the back, you find a similar door, although it's much more pungent and grotesque back here, as it seems like the waste is what collects in this back alley. There's almost a very small, intermittent creek of fluids and water, waste, mixed debris and rubbish back here.
Were he mortal, it might turn his stomach. But to him, an experienced Canaanite, it's just the aroma of life. And all the disgusting realities that come with it.
Give me one moment. Fascinating. All right, go ahead.
He's going to attempt to pick the lock, which might require him digging through some refuse to try to find some makeshift tool to do it with.
Indeed, with your keen insight, it would just be a matter of time before you find an old chicken bone that's sturdy but small and slender enough that this could work. It would be difficult, but if you want to pick a lock, it might do in a pinch.
It's not something he has a lot of experience with, but definitely some. He enjoys getting into places where he's not welcome.
Of course, your hands do smell quite awful after getting it out of this pile of refuse, but you can now attempt to try and get the lock open.
Alright. Is that ledger domain in the system?
Yes.
Alright. Dexterity?
Mm-hmm. Standard difficulty. One success. It takes you quite a while. You think this chicken bone may not work, but then you hear a familiar, satisfying click as something gives way, and sure enough, upon pressing the door, it opens into a very dark room.
He'll heighten his senses, closing the door softly behind him. If he can't see, he'll use his other senses to find his way around.
There is a very low level of ambient light which enters this building, and only because you can heighten your senses can you make use of it. The back room you've entered seems to have many crates. You smell another bucket of what smells like more waste that just wasn't disposed of before someone left. And this looks like it goes to a hallway leading to a staircase that goes up a single level, and the front room, which looks like a kind of entrance where perhaps during the day someone might be greeted by a receptionist of sorts.
He'll take a quick look around this storage room, checking out any manifests or the like that he can find, seeing exactly what the Mercers are dealing with here in Norwich.
You start looking around. Most of what's here seems to be perhaps cargo. You open up one box and find some folded up layers of fine cloth, cotton perhaps. Another one seems to be filled with tallow. You find some wax. Doesn't seem to be all one shipment, perhaps separate samples or individual pieces. There aren't any associated documentation back here, but other than that and the bucket of waste, there's not much of anything that says what anything is.
Not that interesting, so he'll go upstairs to the main room.
Alright, upstairs you find a small study, a few tall bookcases. The upstairs room is a full-size room, although the ceiling is a bit low. You don't quite have to duck, but you wouldn't have to do much to hit the ceiling. So the bookcases are filled with ledgers and tomes, you think records of sorts. And again, there is a table, quill and ink, a neat stack of a few vellum papers, some scrolls, a handful of silver coins. There's a map kind of laid out haphazardly of, looks like the British Isles and perhaps Greater Europe. There's also a chest in the corner.
Anything else of interest on the desk? Any paperwork that's important?
Yes, there's quite a bit of paperwork that looks like it's, for the most part, neatly stacked, but some of them are scrolled up or rolled up scrolls.
He has no interest in crossing the Mercer Company, but if he's going to find out about them, he needs to know who they're working with. So he'll see what kind of companies supply them.
What kind of companies?
Or rather, what kind of companies do business with them for distribution and the like.
As in, like, what materials they trade in and that kind of thing?
Right. So he knows exactly who he's going to go talk to when it's early.
Okay. Looking over some of the documents, you find out by looking at the documents on this table that many of these are letters from like brokers and negotiators for companies, and you find a great variety of vendors, as it were, of different types of products. Some are simple textile manufacturers and negotiations about being bought out and incorporated into the Mercers. Others seem to be updates, letters updating this office on shipments of arms. There is a notice from what looks like maybe a dock worker or some foreman connected with them, alerting them to some anticipated slowdowns due to construction at Great Yarmouth. So overall, your impression is they do business with many different types of vendors. That seems to be almost endless. You can't think of anything they don't trade in.
Interesting. But he is interested in the arms in particular. Does he recall exactly what Cornelius wants to find? Everyone knows they're a big trading company. What else does he want to know?
It seemed like Cornelius was hoping to find more about the power behind the Mercers, about this Basileus, and given what they'd already learned, that Basileus and the Mercers are connected in some way, and this Tower of Talents might be somewhere in the city. Perhaps finding it, or perhaps finding something that links or puts these pieces together that gives them something tangible to target.
Then what he will look for is correspondence from the upper levels of the Mercer Company. Certainly they're going to have some kind of communication even with their outpost branches.
That seems to be noticeably missing. You don't see any communication on this table out in front of you of inter-Mercer communication.
Then they're likely to have it somewhere here. He will take note of the documents on arms, though. Where exactly are these arms going?
From the letter you saw, it looks like the arms are going to an Alfred Percy, somewhere
To
up
one
in the
man?
north. What was your question, sorry?
To one man? He finds that odd.
That's simply the author. It sounds like it's going to a settlement in the north, and this is the negotiator or the correspondent on behalf of the Percys.
Oh. He'll put that into his memory for later. But seeing what he's looking for is not on the desk, he'll head for that chest.
Okay. The chest is fairly large, quite robust. It's wooden, but you quickly notice the iron reinforcements. There's much more done to protect this chest than the door or anything else in this office. And the lock looks quite sturdy as well. You think that chicken bone would break off in this thing?
He'll look around for something else to use then. A letter opener. Some quills. Sturdier quills, anyway. A key if he can find it.
Alright, perception, investigation, difficulty 8. Not quite a botch, but no success. You don't find anything. You don't find a key, I'll say that. I already mentioned the quills, and yes, there is a letter opener.
He will try. Sorry.
That's it, go ahead.
He will try to use those, but he is going to boost his dexterity, directing the blood to his limb.
Okay. The letter opener you think is going to be your best bet. It's actually metal. It might actually not break. Although with enough strength, it'd probably bend on this. And it is small enough that it will fit the keyhole, but obviously this is not a tool meant to open chests. And so this is going to be very difficult. The lock is much harder. You're using a makeshift tool. It's going to be difficulty 9.
All right. With his preternatural dexterity, he will give it a go. Nope. And that is a botch.
That is a botch. You twist and push, and you think you have a similar feeling like the lock before. You hear a click and press it further, but in your excitement, you break off the metal of this little letter opener. It's more fragile than you thought, and the metal is stuck inside the chest.
He grits his teeth. Annoyed, if nothing else. So annoyed, in fact, that he might need to make a willpower check at this point.
That seems reasonable.
Because this is playing into his madness quite well.
A willpower roll, difficulty 6. Two successes, okay. You're getting very frustrated after having had the success of reaching this office only to be foiled by this accursed chest. It does force you to start working on the edges of the chest, but you gain control before you start to deteriorate mentally anymore.
Even so, the failure is at the forefront of his mind, constantly coming back. The image of a broken piece of metal in a lock is haunting his waking mind. But he's angry enough now that he's going to attempt to break it.
Alright. How would you like to break it?
Are there any paperweights or anything with some heft that he can use to sort of leverage?
There is a little silver ingot with an engraving of the name and emblem of the Worshipful Company of Mercers that seems to be holding a few of these scrolls in place. It looks like it's pretty sturdy.
All right. He will take that and attempt to...
Attempt to what, sorry?
Smash the lock open, looking outside to see if there are any guards within earshot.
Alright, You rolled really well on your perception investigation before, so I'm gonna let that roll. You do see some guards passing by, but you think that they'll be gone if you wait a couple minutes.
Then wait he will.
They're slow about passing by. They do stop at the office of the Mercers, and gonna give it a once-over before continuing on. You can hear the discussion, not discussion, but you can hear the chatter. They're talking to each other somewhat loudly. You hear some laughter, and eventually the echoes of their voices go on, and you don't see anybody else up or down the street for quite a ways.
He'll be quick about this, also directing more blood into his muscles,
Okay.
and starting to feel a bit hungry now. But all in the name of investigation.
So give me, I suppose, strength melee would do. It's gonna be awkward, but it's a stationary target. Really, I assume you're trying to kind of smash this ingot into the metal to force the lock.
Correct.
Okay, so you are going to just destroy this lock at the end of it, but it will be open. So, give me a strength melee, difficulty 7. You're going to need 10 successes to break this open.
Are you kidding? Oh, not a botch, thank God.
Not a botch. And for this, it really is just a matter of time. So all I need you to do is make 10 successes without botching, really. So you can keep rolling until either you botch or you get 10 successes. Because you watched out for the guards and you have some time now. Alright, you've got 3. You start pounding away at this. It does make quite a chatter. Clang as metal bangs against ingot. 6 successes, 9 successes. You can start to notice some movement in the chest. With one final strike, out of anger, you hit this ingot very hard, and with that, the lock just breaks entirely and the metal disappears inside the chest. You hear a little clang within. Unlocked.
He'll open it quickly. He may not have much time now.
Inside, you find only papers. Looks like opened letters.
The letters he was searching for?
As you start looking them over, you do start to see what looks like maybe more sensitive discussions. Some of these do include letters from other Mercer outposts, you suspect, just based on the seal of the broken seal and the emblem on the letters you're reading. Give me one moment. Several of these you think would be more interesting to digest at a later time, but one catches your interest immediately. It's dated very recently, and it makes reference to the acquisition of the merchants of the staple as likely to commence very soon. There seems to be discussion of instructions to begin the process, and most alarming of all, it makes very grim reference to the expected demise of the head of the merchants of the staple very soon. which should make things easier.
Since he's already smashed the lock, he might as well not fear taking a document or two. So that one in particular he grabs.
It would be very easy to take the documents in here and hide them in your coat.
He doesn't want them all, that would make him too bulky, but if there's anything else of interest.
You scan quickly with your heightened senses and acute investigatory abilities and pick out the ones with enough verbiage to look particularly sensitive and place the others back in the chest. I'll come back to you on what some of the others say, but you definitely have some things that definitely make this company more vulnerable.
Good. Knowing that his time is limited, surely somebody heard him smashing away in here. He's going to try to put the chest back mostly the way he found it, perhaps laying the lock so it won't look on first glance as though it's been broken.
Alright. It's tough to do, but you angle it just so that maybe they wouldn't notice until they needed to put something away. Is there anything else you would like to do here?
Is there more to this place?
The only place you haven't gone to is the front kind of receptionist area. There's another table, another quill. It looks like the place where if you're going to have a meeting, that's probably where it happens, not upstairs.
He doesn't expect he'll find anything that interesting there, so he's going to make his way out.
Okay, back out the back entrance?
Yes,
Okay,
closing and locking the door behind him.
alright. So you make your way back out into the putrid alley with a few parcels. What next will Nicholas do?
For now, since the hour is early, but not early enough to accomplish what he wants to, he'll return to his room to peruse these documents at his leisure.
Okay. Just making a note. Alright, so you return back to the room you acquired at the inn. And let's see, 6:30. I will have us take a little bit of an early break here before we get into the next scene. So Robert DeVere, you make your trek up north back to the city of Chester. It has been some time since you've been back to the red sandstone of the walls in the castle of Chester, the grassy hills, the sparse woods. You pass a few quarries on the way back in. It is early to middle of the night when you arrive by carriage. You and your two ghouls and a few of your herd. What do you do when you arrive?
Seek audience with Barbaros.
Alright. You bring your entourage with you?
Is that proper etiquette?
You have pretty good etiquette. I'm not going to make you roll for it. It would be better if you had them wait somewhere. Vampire lords such as Barbaros take offense to dealing with mortals. Court is sometimes held by the more stuffy of them only amongst their own. And he is of that mindset.
I'll have them wait at the nearest tavern.
Okay. Guy to Free is eager to please and agrees to kind of shepherd your herd as well as Heather until you are returned. So you make your way to the Moat and Bailey Castle of Chester. The square stone tower is kind of off red hue in the night sky. You pass through a stone gateway. There are many guards that are quite vigilant. You are stopped and have to kind of explain yourself to some of the sergeant-at-arms. Eventually, you are escorted to the Great Hall. It's a small matter of getting entrance with your status and your gauntlet ring. And after some delay, you are within the Great Hall, the Court of Chester. Again, the castle is quite impressively designed. The stone walls stretch up 2 stories. There are the large banners of the triplicate golden lions on a red background. The Lancasters hold much sway here. The person you are greeted by is Magister Tradian Swift, who steps out from a hallway into the Great Hall. The hearth is not lit, but there are many torches ensconced, which are guards duly set on every entrance. It reminds you much of actually Ragnar's court. And the Tredian Swift himself is actually flanked by 2 guards as he enters also. Ah, Lord de Vere. Good evening.
Good evening, Magister.
He has a kind of soft, warm smile as he walks closer to kind of grasp your forearm in a very friendly manner.
The likes of which Robert will mirror.
The guards flanking him wait a good pace away, a respectful distance. He kind of ushers you away to a small table to sit down, still in the Great Hall. I apologize, the prince is occupied at this time. What for you?
Well, I did come to speak with the prince. Do you know when he will be available?
Unfortunately, it's not my place to say what the prince is occupied with, except to say that it may be some time. An hour, perhaps a few. But as his magister, I perhaps can discuss with you your reason for being here.
But of course. A decent enough way to pass the time. How has relations with Ragnar been?
Kind of looks at you sideways as though incredulous. Quite cold.
Any new incursions?
No, none yet. We are of the understanding that the Covenant has backed Ragnar in this conflict, so you will have to understand my reticence in discussing at length what information or movement our forces have had. Of course, I receive you as an honored and respected guest. You must understand limitations of what I may say.
Of course. Well, I certainly bring much news. Perhaps news that Barbaros would be most interested in is the fate of his trading vessel.
He narrows his eyes ever so slightly. What news do you bring of that?
Just I know of who the perpetrators are and the waters it frequents.
Truly. Well, it would certainly be something he'd be interested in hearing. I could relay this to him on your behalf. It would go a great deal towards perhaps mending bridges between Chester and the rest of the Covenant. He took it quite poorly that the Covenant did not back him in this conflict.
Completely understandable. I also bring grimmer news that must be for his ears only.
Must be quite grim indeed.
Of course, it is in regards to the Covenant.
Well, as I said, Prince is quite indisposed at this time. However, if it is of urgent news, if you tell me, I will immediately relay the message.
Because of the delicacy of the nature of this information, I must request that I speak with him personally, as a member of the Gauntlets.
I assure you, Lord de Vere, there are none closer to the Prince or more in his interest than I.
Then I am certain you will be present when he speaks.
Although finishing the sentence with a smile, it starts to fade as you say that. He looks down. Regarding the Covenant, you say?
Yes.
He seems to ponder that for a few moments in silence. Very well. I will see if he can be pried from his occupation. He offers a quick smile before rising. Please do wait here.
Many thanks. Can Robert give a check and see if he's telling the truth?
Make a perception empathy roll. Standard difficulty. Two successes. You think so. You get the impression that he's frustrated and anxious, but you don't detect subterfuge in his answer. At least not from what you can tell.
Robert will wait then.
guards return to flanking him as he disappears again down the hallway. Ultimately, you end up waiting close to half an hour before the sound of boots on stone becomes audible again. More boots than you heard before. First entering the room is, of course, Chester Prince Barbaros himself. Magistrate Ready and Swift quickly behind him, and this time 6 guards. You can see Barbaros looks visibly irritated. He does not look as though he is dressed for office at this time. He is in very comfortable robes, and he seems to be wiping away at something as he enters the Great Hall. At his face. Wiping away something at his face. Lord de Vere, to what do I owe this encounter? I was told it was quite urgent.
Yes, my prince. And I suspect you would be most interested in the news I bring.
Do not waste your flowery language on me, de Vere. Out with it.
Which would you like to hear first, your ship or the Covenant?
Whichever news you deemed it to be so urgent that I should come out.
Very well. Well, first, the seizure of your ship was indeed perpetrated by members of the Anarch faction. And it pains me to say that they were quite close to us. I speak, of course, the former members of the Gauntlet.
What? Speak plainly.
Out of character, I cannot recall where the waters the ship was in. Do you have that on hand?
Irish Sea, if I remember correctly.
Irish Sea? Okay. No more focused area, just Irish Sea?
As to where it was taken or where it is now?
I guess we'll go with where it was taken and then where it's probably at now. Pretty much what he knew.
As I recall, and someone can feel free to correct me, what you heard from Saraceno was this prevalent rumor or indication that Cormac and Thomas took the Von Danzig on its route from Dublin back to Liverpool, which would put it somewhere in the southern Irish Sea, broadly speaking.
Well, the now deceased Cormac and the living Thomas, or should I say Judith, were the ones who commandeered your ship and took sail off to Dublin, where they delivered the ship into Anarch hands, which no doubt patrols the southern Irish Sea at the moment.
I think you meant they delivered it to Douglas.
Or Douglas, sorry.
Yeah. You say that's the can you be sure it was not Ragnar?
I can be certain I pulled it from a Anarch member myself.
He looks to Magistrate Trady and Swift slowly. Ah. It seems perhaps the Warren was at least half correct.
Yes, half correct. The other, and this one, is the one that required secrecy. Another one I pulled information off, which has been verified from the now... Well, start over. Judith has given us information. Perhaps they are just merely playing an archangel, but they've given us information of a traitor within the Covenant. And I had the opportunity to catch a hunter who was able to tell us, verify many of what she told, as they are suspecting the ones behind the Mercer are indeed working out of Norwich. Of course, you know whose domain this is.
What concern do I have of the Mercer Company? I know of their existence, yes. Powerful merchants. How does this relate to the Covenant?
I'm sorry, what was the name that was mentioned before? The one at the Tower of Talons?
Basileus?
Yes, Basileus. Does the name Basileus mean anything to you?
No. Should it?
It should. This is well, they've kept themselves well hidden, so perhaps you shouldn't. This individual, I suspect they are quite old, and they are making a power grab on our land. They've been using the Mercer Company to greaten the strife. And indeed, the old gauntlet was wiped out because of this involvement. There was a Nosferatu scene at the deaths of the last gauntlet. Does this imply anything to you?
You speak of many things, Robert de Vere. But of this last, a prior, I expect there are fools from each clan who seek to gain power at any cost. As for increasing strife, I know not what you speak of.
Besides the obvious crippling hold on the economy, they have been funding both sides of the houses in this war.
So they are war profiteers. Despicable, but not necessarily my problem.
Of course not. That is just a little piece in the puzzle. When the gauntlet got close to discovering who was behind them, they were wiped out, only to, I'm sure, to increase strife between you and Ragna. I would not be surprised to find out that they had a hand in my sire's death, if that indeed did occur. Grandsire. Very well, I will speak plainly. The hunter has pointed their agents, the ones behind the Mercer Company, to be operating directly out of Norwich. This would be in the domain of a member of the Covenant who has... been very silent. As far as I know. Have you had contact with Sebastian?
No more or less than any other night or year. You attribute many things to this group, which you say operates under Sebastian's nose.
Yes.
But you are mistaken if you think the strife between myself and Ragna was not born out of mutual hatred many years ago.
I make no claims of that. Only the uneasy tension has been grown. The rage, yes. I've spent much time in Ragna's domain. And she has shown no signs of this yet. In my travels, I have seen both Anarch involvement and other suspicions. I saw the former sheriff of London, Jack Timber, slaughter a village. Out of character, how close was this to Chester? This is pretty far away, wasn't it?
I believe it was pretty close to London.
Yeah.
So if I understand this mad rambling of occurrences, you see this as a constellation of increased strife by some group in Norwich, with some aim of war profiteering.
Not just that, merely to weaken the Covenant. I'm sure this elder kindred would make a attempt at power using his agents, which are many. And of course, if the merciful Mercers are the ones that they are fronting as their operation, the vast resources they have could not only cripple us, our economy, but also fund a very large invasion.
Robert, give me a charisma expression. Difficulty here is going to be 9. To make your case to Barbaros. Not a botch, only barely. It is a failure. Your claims are very far-fetched, Lord de Vere, and even if I were to believe them, perhaps it would not be the greatest evil for this war to continue. For it is Ragnar who will eventually fall behind my boot. She will rue the night that she crossed me so long ago.
I would merely put forth a ceasefire for the... not for the... undetermined amount of time, but enough to consolidate, to take hold of the root of corruption within both the Covenant and the threat posed by the worshipful Mercers.
Claim to receive much information from a hunter. Is that correct?
Yes. Mainly information that confirmed what the now traitorous Judith put forth.
So by your own admission, you take your intel from traitors and hunters of our kind. And with that information armed, you would, besiege Prince Sebastian for some invasion to hunt down some group under his nose. Have you gone mad, Lord de Vere?
No. The method that the Mercers have gone through to hide, to actively attack the hunters, only furthers the proof that they were a threat to them, to their operation. The fact that we were able to obtain one and pull information out of them was very fortunate. The hunters knew nothing of our inner workings, only where a kindred they themselves captured and interrogated pointed the way.
I think perhaps you have been struck with some madness. Your convoluted stories, they sound irrational. I do not expect Ragnar to throw down arms, to halt. Not now that the tides have begun to turn. In fact, I find it somewhat inauspicious that, as the Duke of York is deported back to Ireland, this offer comes forward of a truce. I took you into this court because you had left a fine impression in the past, Lord of Vere, and perhaps I would accept a parley on the Covenant's behalf. But I think perhaps you speak too much now.
Very well.
You have no proof. Your claims are outlandish. The timing is inconvenient. You seem to have wasted your time here, Lord de Vere.
It seems I have. I shall depart then.
He nods to you, still looking irritated. And he turns to depart himself back down the hallway. Magistrate Tredian Swift offers a polite, perhaps dour smile and nods to you, bowing actually, and then follows after.
Yeah, Robert will take his leave and head back to the tavern then.
Head back to the tavern?
Mm-hmm.
All right. You return to the tavern. You find Guy has bought a few rounds of drink for himself, you heard. He rises and sees you entering. My lord, shall we be staying long? Did things go well?
Negotiations did not go as well as hoped.
Ah, I am sorry to hear that, my lord. Will we be staying the night?
We shall. There is no rush to leave.
He seems to smile more at that. I have gone about getting us rooms.
Well done. Ever dependable you are.
He smiles brightly and nods a couple times. And then you see that Heather is by him as well. He clasps her hand. If you should need us, we will be upstairs. And they walk off, going upstairs, in something of a slight hurry.
Robert just smiles as he lingers around the tavern. He'll think upon the next night to perhaps speak with the Magister. instead of Barbaros, if he'll even be granted entry. That remains to be seen.
All right. So you ponder, and the scene fades on Robert sitting down in thought as we transition. Meanwhile, it is around mid-May 1456, Elined. You made your trip up to Birmingham from London, hopeful in meeting with Judith again, although given from her estimate, you know not to expect her for another week, so you have a week to spend in Birmingham. Is there anything in particular you want to do in that time before she arrives?
Familiarize herself more with the area.
Okay. Anything in particular, or any end goal you really want to have from that?
She's more keeping an eye out to see if there's any other kindred in the area. Just in case someone else is sent here as a... Well, just for safety's sake.
Okay. So keeping an eye out for other Canaanites or kindred, as they're sometimes called nowadays. You looking for the physical signs of life or anything in particular?
She has been one for quite a while, so if she is more looking for certain tells.
Okay.
More while she's going to taverns, since those are oh so common dens for them.
They're quite popular. You can give me either a perception or a wits and an investigation. Difficulty here is going to be 7. Everything here is new since you don't really spend any time here. So first you have to get acclimated, then you learn what the baseline is. One success. You do eventually pick up that there is a young man. He must be barely a neonate, if not a fledgling. His feeding is a little bit sloppy, and he has taken note of you, but he seems to keep his distance. He's a scrawny young man, maybe barely 18.
As to not to let him know that she caught on, she's going to play up the entertainer role and do yet another bout of poetry she was oh so frequently doing back when she was in London.
Sure. Another charisma expression roll. Standard difficulty.
And that is with the specialty.
Alright, so 4 successes. You put on a very nice and eloquent kind of discussion. You read poetry and get a small but lively audience to listen to you in between drinks. And you even catch more of the attention of this young man. He seems a bit enthralled now. So your poetry readings have done much to gain some favor in of some of these nights.
Yes. What remaining time she has there, unless this boy approaches her, is more going to be spent raising her reputation for that specific tavern. Make it easier for her to feed there if she needs to.
Okay. Over this week, I think that role is very reflective of your success in general. If you wanted to feed there, it would probably be a little bit easier since you've already kind of softened them up. People look at you with friendly smiles, eager to hear more of your learned words far away. They don't get a lot of that. And it is around the end of this week when you're in this tavern, you finish reciting some poetry, the crowd eventually disperses after, dropping what few pence they have in appreciation, and they start to make their way away. When you see through the crowds that it appears, based on past experiences, look for Judith, and you recognize her form stepping in.
She will, much as Judith did with her before, tip a waitress to go deliver Judith a message to send her over.
Right. Judith, very ironically, this time you're the one who receives invitation.
I feel like Elined was probably a little bit more conspicuous than Judith had been.
Likely.
She'll obviously honor the invitation and go and join Elined at her table, or where have you.
Alright, Elined, you see that Judith gets the invitation and sits down at this corner table you have. You still get occasional smiles and waves from some of the people passing by.
I have good news and bad news as far as business is concerned.
Can't be all bad. You still have your head.
That is part of the good news. There was no... Well, of course there was anger, but it was not overtly violent to any person's anger.
I imagine our overture for recompense went over a bit like a fart in church.
It actually went over decently. He is considering it, considering the greater threat at hand. And as much as he dislikes the concept, he wishes to have some additional time so he can meet with the other members.
I expected. I don't suppose you noted whether or not he was putting you on.
I do not believe he was, no.
I told Ellen that I didn't believe you would deliberately mislead us.
So
I
far
still
I
don't.
have not.
Ambrose is another story. He's canny. You don't imagine he wants to foist over all of Norwich.
Oh, definitely not. One of his pieces of furniture, or the remnants of it, should be a testament to that.
I also expected some need to adjust timetables and negotiate demands. If all he's asking is time, I suppose we're getting off light.
Yes. At least that's as far as what he's asking for now. He hasn't spoken with the others in power yet.
As far as timetables, given the distance required to march, if we are indeed going to move forward with plans, any later than August might be difficult. The rains come with the harvest. We may not be able to muster the same forces that late in the year.
Of course.
Last I knew, you were... Oh, no, she wouldn't know that. Blame my last. I hope my message didn't draw you off anything important. You said you were in Lincoln when it reached you. For Cormac.
Yes, it was shortly after his funeral. And after visiting a relative of mine.
Was that the only reason you were in Lincoln, or had you business elsewhere?
I did have business elsewhere, but a potential truce seemed more pressing considering the threat at hand.
Judith smirks a little bit. But you still
Furthermore,
think I'm double talking.
my apologies, what was that?
I said, but you still think I'm double talking you.
Not with matters this pressing, no. Once the demands from the whole of the group come back, then there could be something, but not at the current moment, no.
We'll sweeten the pot a bit. We'll turn over the Von Danzig back to Chester.
She raises an
Though
eyebrow. Have the higher ups agreed to this?
they hadn't agreed to anything until I brought it to them 2 weeks ago.
Huh.
But only if they ask for more. Farbaros will take some convincing, I'm sure.
Oh, speaking of Barbaros, I believe by now Robert should have spoken with him.
Fat lot of good it will do.
Either things might be eased a bit, or it's going to be significantly worse.
I would say either everything's going to get infinitely worse, or nothing will change at all.
That is likely the more realistic approach.
The man's like a bear in a cage. Doesn't know much else to do except swat at everything that passes through the bars.
On an unrelated note, have you noticed any others like us in this town?
If I'm terribly honest, I hadn't thought there would be much town to support many like us. Though
It seems there's another Amelia here. Though this one is male. Very much scrawny, very much not knowing what he's doing.
be careful of that. Not just because of Amelia, but certain groups have eyes everywhere. You may have been meant to see what you saw.
Understandably so. Which is precisely why I brought it up. Either it is, in fact, another young one abandoned, or it is someone feeding information to someone else. Though if he is an actor, he's a rather convincing one.
Without turning, Judith will simply ask, "Is he here still?"
She'll glance around.
Now that you know who to look for, you can give me a perception investigation roll, standard difficulty. It's still fairly crowded in here. Three successes.
Does detail-oriented apply?
Oh, absolutely. So 6 successes. Alright, so you pick him out quickly. You see a few tables back. There are many heads to see past, but You catch his eyes looking at yours. Obviously, he was looking at your table when you look at him, and he immediately looks down. He looks frightened.
As she notices that, she gets a small, polite smile and says, "In fact, he seems to be watching us at this exact moment." With her eyes still on the table he's at.
You see in looking at him and the table, he feigns or pantomimes drinking from his cup poorly and sets it down and then stands up as though to leave.
Judith will glance very briefly over her shoulder, trying not to get caught looking.
You see a mass of bodies, people moving all over the place, walking this way and that.
Can I see if I can pick him out of the crowd? The person she's watching?
Yeah, based on description of a scrawny boy looking through the crowds, perception investigation, difficulty 7. It's a little hard. 2 successes. Alright. You do see one awkward-looking young chap who kind of stumbles over something. That's how it catches your direction. You see is walking towards the exit.
I'll keep an eye out for him. No sense troubling him overmuch.
He has been present for a few of my poetry performances. Perhaps my talking to him might go over better.
I won't presume to tell you what to do, but he's not troubling us. I don't see a reason to trouble him.
If he is indeed new at this, with how he's currently going about it, it won't be long before he's caught by others.
Are you suggesting I see about arranging a place to have a chat?
We can certainly have a little group chat before I go on my way.
I suppose it wouldn't fall ill to have an extra set of eyes, favorably disposed.
Of course.
I'll see if I can't find a quiet stable, out of the way. We're not but horses' asks in here. And with that, Judith will rise and step out into the night. See about hitting up the stable to have a makeshift chat in quiet.
Stable's not very far from here. It's a relatively small stable. Old wooden walls that are open. You can kind of see the horses as you pass by. Large piles and squares of hay. Kind of bent wooden roof overhead. There's maybe 8 or 9 horses lodged here. Doesn't smell very pleasant in here. There's a single man who looks like he is carrying some buckets of water to one of the horses and passes by. This is not the same guy.
Judith will post up at the entrance to the stable and wait for Elined.
Elined is going to try to catch up with the boy and convince him to come with her so they can have a chat.
Alright. You leave the tavern, and knowing who to look for, you see he's made good progress, but not an incredible distance from the tavern. He is definitely walking away from it, further down the street into town, towards the homes.
She'll go and catch up to him. My apologies. I do not mean to disturb.
Oh! He kind of startles as he realizes you kind of ran up to him. Oh, apologies, my lady. Meant no disrespect.
None was taken. I simply wish to have a chat with you. My compatriot would like to speak to you as well.
Oh. He kind of fiddles with his hands together. He's a tall, scraggly kid. He's dressed very plainly in kind of peasant garb. His hair is unkempt. Not dirty, but it's certainly no noble.
Well, Elined herself is still dressed like the common folk, so that's not entirely out of place.
No, you look very suitable together. Why, listen to some of your poetry. It was quite nice.
Yes, I do have a good deal of pride when it comes to that.
Begging your pardon. Are you like me?
I believe that's part of the conversation that should be held in places that cannot be overheard.
Oh, right. He looks around.
Now, if you'd like, you can come with me and we can have that chat.
You're not going to...
Not going to what? I can assure you violence is not something I had on mind.
Alright.
Do you want me to roll anything to try to ease him into this?
Yeah, give me a manipulation empathy. Actually, charisma empathy.
Same dice pool.
Difficulty 6. Two successes. Your simple appearance, while in most places working against you actually helps a lot here in disarming him. Alright. He follows after you, kind of walking side by side. And you lead him to the stable.
Yep.
So he steps in, and Judith, you see the boy being led in.
Before we do this, can I, what's the word? Can I dominate the stable boy into standing watch and making sure we're not disturbed?
Yeah, what do you want to tell him to do?
Basically just if anyone comes around or makes like they're going to go into the stable to make a ruckus.
Alright. So that'll be subjugation. Give me a manipulation leadership, difficulty 6. The more successes, the more ingrained it is.
It's an awful high willpower he has.
It's actually not based on willpower. Six successes. You have very strong instruction planted in him. He immediately turns and walks towards the door, standing still as a guard. He even dropped his little pitchfork, which he had since picked up, kind of falls into a pile of hay.
Now then.
While she was waiting, Judith would have unbuttoned a button or two on her blouse. She has every intention of we'll say, bending this fledgling a bit.
Alright. The boy looks a little concerned at the stable boy, who's gonna drop everything he did and walked over to the door. He looks around and sees you, Judith, and seems a bit nervous again, looking between the two of you. What can I... He kind of mumbles on himself.
To answer your question from before, yes. We are similar.
What do you want with me?
Are there any others like us in this town?
In this town? Sometimes. I met a couple, but mostly told me to piss off. Told me to stay out of certain areas. I couldn't do what we do. It's made things quite difficult.
Which areas?
Well, I was at that tavern for some time, but I only try now and again. It's risky. I try not to do it by the church. I wish not to offend him. He just looks up. Christ save me.
She's gonna roll perception empathy to see if this kid is an actual fledgling instead of just acting.
Absolutely. Perception, empathy. Standard difficulty. More successes you get, the more information.
Yeah, Judith's getting in on this too.
Sure. One success for Elined, 3 for Judith. Elined, he reminds you a lot of Amelia. Definitely seems genuinely unconfident in what to do. Judith, you get the same, but you don't think he's performing. You think that he's worried that you're gonna, maybe tell him the same thing, that this is about hunting. So he has a lot of fear, but you don't get any sense that he's putting on a show at all. You're very confident in that.
Hunt where you like, boy. Frankly, so long as no one sees you do it, it's no consequence of mine.
Yes, as long as you're being discreet, it shouldn't be a problem.
Well, I've gotten better over the night.
It is something you learn with time.
In tutelage, if you'd had your sire with you. What's your name, boy?
Matthew.
And you trade?
Well, I was a herdsman, but I can't very well herd in the day anymore. It's made things quite difficult for my family.
Matthew Shepherd, then.
Aye.
And if it is not too brazen to ask, of what lineage do you hail from?
Begging your pardon, miss, I don't understand the words you're saying.
Your blood carries certain abilities. Which of the clans do you hail from, or do you not know?
He kind of mumbles again quietly, looking down, uncertain.
Judith looks a little skeptical at Elined. A shepherd, abandoned by his sire. 3 guesses.
Yes, I know these guesses well.
I'd imagine probably the Wolf's Head. How long have you been on your own, Matthew?
Almost a year now. It's getting harder and harder to explain things to my family. Telling them I'm ill, prone to falling asleep, and spending more and more time away.
This is the more painful part. Families, especially mortal ones, are not recommended for our kind. The secret is bound to get out eventually.
Was worried you say that. What, He looks back between the two of you. What are the two of you doing here?
Friendly chat.
Yes, we have gone on quite a few travels together before.
A friendly chat about what?
Nothing to concern yourself over much. Though, I wonder if I might ask a bit of cooperation. You seem uninterested in running afoul of others of our kind, and I like to be aware who's about. What say you keep an eye out? While you're in town, of course. If you happen to see anyone of our ilk about, other than the two of us, of course, you let me know when you see me next.
I can do that.
Though, there is another way to tell which of the clans you hail from. Have you noticed any abilities you did not have before?
Well, I seem not to need to breathe anymore. I don't get tired.
No, I mean like the ability to command others, supernatural strength.
How'd you see in the dark, boy?
See in the dark? No, nothing of the sort. He shrugs again. It's all so different. Nothing is the same anymore. I wouldn't know. I don't have the same tastes, and everything seems different. And it's all a gift and a curse. I can't tell one apart from the other.
Have you started missing a good mug of brown yet?
Tried for a while. Just couldn't keep it down.
I still miss a good mug of brown.
I suppose there was one time I got on the wrong side of one of us, one of our kind, and threw me against a wall. I thought it'd break my back, but I seemed to get up well enough. Anyway, I can look around and tell you if I see anything. If you say I can feed anywhere.
It's probably not a bad idea to give the church its birth.
the same, I can barely walk in there anymore.
Curious. You might think about searching for greener pastures. Obviously, you can't linger around your family forever. The questions will be harder and harder to answer.
Precisely my point.
I wish I could leave. I don't have any coin, and I'm trying to take care of my family. I can't just abandon them. I'll make it work.
I'll tell you what. For keeping an eye out and telling us of others like us, you notice, I can pay you for it.
Really?
She nods.
That would be brilliant. I could start bringing food back.
Whose herd does your family keep?
Question was, who's herd?
Right. I imagine they're not wealthy enough to own their own herd, so it's likely to be some nobles.
One moment. Look at my notes. That would be the Baron. Baron Lawrence Woods.
Interesting. I wonder if he would know which castle or which freehold the man stays in.
I would say you've been here long enough that you've probably heard that name. Give me one sec. Yes, you've heard of Baron Lawrence Woods. It's a nearby barony that borders this town. The barony's name is Shenley Green. It's a small barony.
I might go have a chat with the Baron.
We don't want any trouble.
Nor would I like to give you any. But a fair shake deserves a fair turn.
Who all are you looking for in this area, if I may be asking?
I'd just like to be informed of comings and goings.
Yes, we are rather new here.
There's a lot of that. Seems like we get a lot of travelers, couriers, carriages, mostly passing through. Once in a while they stop.
But most are not like us.
No, my lady. Not many.
I believe the main interest is with others like ourselves.
He nods.
And if you are from the lineage that my companion here suspects... She glances over at Judith. Would it be too out of the question to find out if he can get a mentor of sorts from the people you know?
I can certainly send word. I know the big one might be a bit off-putting.
That might be putting it mildly.
For the time being, I don't mean to go back until I've heard more from her other friends.
Of course. And to get you started, my dear boy, she will go through and see how much she has to offer him.
Given the great treasure that Ragna gave you at your sire's home in Bristol, you have quite a bit. Even a handful of silver would be probably many years of salary to this boy.
Yes, she's going to hand him a handful of silver.
His eyes grow gigantic as he holds out and looks at every single coin that falls into his hand. My lady, this is too generous.
You said you have a family to tend to, did you not?
I do?
Once things are resolved, it also frees you up to try to figure out this new life.
I don't know what to say. Thank you, milady.
You speak of the man upstairs. Is it not his charitable to those less fortunate?
He smiles. You see some of the fears finally receding. Give me a perception, empathy roll. Difficulty 8.
I don't notice anything.
No, he smiles warmly, and it's a double botch. A botch for both of you. He kind of hefts the silver a couple times. I don't even know what we do with all this. Whatever we don't need, perhaps I'll give to the church. To those less fortunate. Perhaps then God will forgive me for what I am.
I might steer clear of the church. Save it for a rainy day.
Yes, this way you won't have to scrounge around for funds to tend to your family.
Well, thank you again. I had my worries when you came up to me, but perhaps this is God showing me there's a way forward in all this.
Wouldn't that be an interesting quirk? You and I, messengers for God.
That would be interesting.
The clergy do say God works in mysterious ways.
Indeed they do.
They also say, do good to those that hate you, and then declare holy wars.
I don't know nothing about that. I'll keep a lookout, though. He nods, looking between both of you, looking eager.
There's a good lad. Off you go then.
He smiles, looking down at the pile of silver in his hands, and walks off with a spring in his step. Leaving the two of you in the stable.
Well, that went better than expected.
Much better. Seems my first thought that he was another Amelia was correct. Though hopefully with a better ending.
He did say it'd been nearly a year. I expect he'll have a visitor before long. I wouldn't want anyone looking for their erstwhile child to come hunting us.
If there's visitor.
Assuming the bloke isn't Ash or captured somewhere. I expect so.
Well, now that that's done, how late in the night is it?
It's the middle of the night, getting on not too late, but maybe more than half over.
I should make arrangements for leaving on the morrow.
Quite so. As I said, I have every intention to linger, at least until there's something to report back.
Of course. Though the question is, how long will you give for that delay on the besiegement of Carlisle?
As I said, I'm willing to wait as late as August. Later if there's a good reason, but it better be a damn good reason.
Of course.
If you're serious, I wouldn't play that hand unless you're forced to. Nor the bit about the Carrick.
I'm sorry about the what?
The boat.
The boat, of course, was going to be left in... sorry, connection. The boat, of course, was going to be left in case there were arguments.
Aye. Keep both under your skirts, unless you're forced to do otherwise.
All right.
So far as the Covenant need know, we're willing to give them until August, not later. Might be a good idea to make a show of hemming and hawing about coming back to us with any requests for further delays. Really drive the point home.
I will keep that in mind.
Remember, I'm not new at negotiating.
I am certainly aware you're not. And I'm certain they're going to try to come back with something. Though what that something will be is purely up to speculation at the moment.
Assuming he actually went and spoke with any of the other Covenant members at all.
No, I believe he's trying to arrange for them all to meet in a singular location again.
Then a month. At least.
At least.
Don't be shocked if Barbaros blows it off.
I certainly won't be surprised. I certainly won't be surprised if he tries to use that to his advantage as well.
It might be in your best interest, after you've taken our expanded offers back to Mordecai, to request leave to speak with Ragna directly, and press upon her the importance of attending this audience.
I can certainly see to that. I was intending to go speak with her anyway, once this was dealt with as much as I can deal with it.
I'd very much prefer if you presented the evidence that we've gathered thus far.
Do you mean in general, or...?
To the Covenant Princes.
Very well.
Ambrose and Mordecai may have something to say on the matter, but at least I have some faith left that you'll hit all the major points.
I do try to do so. But I should make arrangements. And I believe you said you wanted to send word to someone?
Did I? I don't remember saying that.
I thought she said that in reference to trying to get this poor boy a mentor before he gets himself killed.
Oh, no, not. That was not meant to be immediate. When you come back, do you remember the axe?
The axe. Yes, the one we finish early.
I'd like to make a gift of it.
That's gonna be difficult.
Oh?
Did I not tell you? I could have sworn I did. Well, we were down in that unfortunate city with the holy aura. It was taken by some hunters that raided the inn I was staying in.
Judith looks appropriately miffed.
They raided during the day. I was asleep at the time.
It's no bother, really. I simply thought Jack would have liked it.
Well, if he intends to go pry it from the hands of the hunters, I'm not going to stop him. But the hunter that we interrogated... he made it quite clear that if anyone were to try to drink his blood, it would be searing pain.
I just thought it might be poetic for a siege to be laid with the weapon of one slain by the individual being besieged.
As novel as an idea as it is, Unfortunately, unless we go through some significant lengths and anger the church, it's not going to happen.
It was just a thought.
And unless there's anything else to be said, Elined will go on her way to make arrangements.
And Judith will dismiss the compulsion on the stable boy.
He seems to kind of blink a few times and snap out of it, looking confused and a little bit embarrassed as he goes to pick up his pitchfork again. And the two of you part ways into the night.
I think the rest of the night, Judith is going to be poking around town looking for signs of other Canaanites. Matthew seemed quite adamant that they weren't the only ones that have passed through. They may not still be here, but yeah.
Yeah, give me a perception investigation roll. Difficulty 8. Zero success. It's hard to tell. Sometimes you think that maybe someone's a little bit weaker and paler than they should be. Maybe that was Matthew, maybe that was someone else. Maybe it's just somebody who's pale and weak. You're not sure. You don't see anybody who stands out or is obviously watching you. But you keep an eye out. Once in a while you'll see Matthew and he seems right at the sight of you. But otherwise you go about your business. As Elined arranges to depart back to London, it will take you another week, bringing you towards the end of May in 1456. Meanwhile, Nicholas, you return back to the tavern, the inn you were staying at, the Golden Goat, with your pilfered parcels of intel. As I said, it's still, middle of the night on the night that you're working on. Is there anything else you want to do on this evening?
No, just read through this paperwork, see what you can figure out. Which you don't have to tell me right now, I can wait.
Okay, we'll come back to that. And Robert, you're also in the middle of May 1456, after some initial difficulties gaining any traction with Barbaros on a truce with Ragna. What does Robert ponder upon? What does he decide his course of action will be?
Well, he'll try to work on the Magister. Pretty and swift.
Okay. What is your strategy here for working on him?
Well, strategy will be... Well, both will be kind of reading the man himself, but he'll also give a more concise explanation. Kind of mentioned that the others were sent out to negotiate peace. So it's not like it's just a ploy to lull Barbaros into missing an opportunity. Emphasizing the threat that negotiations with the Anarchs is a possibility.
All right, so you emphasize negotiating for peace with the Anarchs rather than peace with Ragna, or both?
Well, both. He'll just be using the peace of the Anarchs as an indicator of how dire the situation is.
Okay.
And that's the fact that he's there, even to begin with, is a sign that the council, or at least he hasn't completely abandoned Barbaros and sided with Ragna.
Okay. Is your goal just to build rapport and relations with Masquerade?
Yeah, start with that. It'll give him the useful information as well, but that's definitely his goal, is to build rapport.
Okay. In your discussions, Tredian Swift seems to commiserate with your position. He seems to be a little bit more reasonable than Barbaros, understanding that it sounds as though you've been put in a difficult position if all you say is true, and he isn't quite as skeptical of you as Barbaros is. Even in lack of hard evidence, he seems to understand that this is a very precarious diplomatic situation for everyone involved, you included. And so your time spent making your point seems to get through to Tredian Swift, but he tells you that Barbaros will need a lot more than honeyed words and assurances, even from him, to have another audience.
Well, he knows Barbaros best. What would gather his attention the most?
Tredian vaguely refers to hard proof, something that could be held or pointed to or shown, something that doesn't rely on the wagging tongue of emissaries to be true.
Okay. Well, Robert will lament he doesn't have anything of that nature yet, but perhaps the other members will come through, assuming negotiations even go well with his rival, or Barbaros's rival.
He wishes you Godspeed in your efforts and hopes for continued negotiations, even if Barbaros seems unwilling.
Robert will genuinely thank Tredian Swift, and he'll He'll linger in the city until Nicholas comes. He was on his way, yes. That's what I recall last.
Was that Nicholas's plan after Canterbury?
I don't think Nicholas has a plan yet.
There you go. Or Norwich,
guess-
I should say, sorry.
Yeah, I knew what you were talking about, but yeah, he'll figure that out once he figures out what he's doing with Cornelius.
Mm-hmm. Alright, so you're gonna linger in town for some time. Judith remains in Birmingham. Elined returns to London with news. Hopefully to speak to the Covenant and find out what their decision on negotiations are. And Nicholas remains in Norwich, finding out what he may about the Mercers. I think that's an excellent point for us to pause here and end the session. And we will pick it up again at our next game.